For all the talk about racism in our country today, I rarely hear people address the question of where it comes from. Why does it arise? But that's an essential question, perhaps the essential question when discussing what to do about it. I'm convinced and will argue that racism arises from tribalism. And tribalism is something that has been hardwired into us for hundreds of thousands of years. Racism per se isn't in our DNA, but tribalism certainly is. Tribalism, or the denigration and mistrust of other tribes, is directed against the other. And that other might be of a different race, ethnicity, religion, nationality, linguistic group, socioeconomic group, really any other group or tribe of people. Today, we see this playing out most acutely in the United States between political tribes, and it's downright destructive. Don't believe me? Check your Facebook feed. When our ancestors lived in small groups of no more than about 140, and food and shelter were in short supply, tribalism made a lot of sense. It kept my tribe alive and it passed on my kind of DNA. But now, in our huge, diverse, interconnected, and interdependent world, it tends to get us in trouble. It's a remnant of our evolutionary development that now does more harm than good. Tribalism can be minimal with low stakes, like with football fans when you support the Eagles over the Cowboys. Or it can be insidious, like when someone cheers for the Patriots. If we look at human history, we find plenty of examples of groups harassing, discriminating against, persecuting, enslaving, and killing other groups. It's a universal. Our genetic penchant for distrust and fear of others makes this a natural phenomenon in human history. The other can be those who are rich, and the other can be those who are poor. They can be the educated, and they can be the uneducated. Bigotry takes many forms, and people have enslaved and killed members of all those groups for thousands of years. Now, racism, and I'm referring to the traditional concept of racism here, is one particular kind of dangerous, destructive, and nefarious tribalism. I'm not using more recent definitions of racism coming out of critical race theory. I find them more harmful than helpful to improving race relations. I'm referring to the belief that one race or ethnicity is superior to another. Racism is one type of disparaging of the other. Racism takes that natural tribalism and elevates it to the idea that the other is inherently inferior. Wars have been fought and countless millions killed because they belong to inferior religions or cultures. But racism elevates this to the other person, him or herself, being subhuman. And this is a truly dangerous expression of tribalism. I think we can identify at least 3 reasons that tribalism can express itself as racism. 1, sometimes it comes from an arrogance, seeing members of a less industrialized society as inherently less intelligent. Colonial powers like the Spanish in the Philippines or the Arabs in North Africa can fit this model. 2, sometimes it has been used as an excuse to subjugate or enslave another group, as we see in the history of the United States or the treatment of Chinese ethnic minorities by the Han. 3, sometimes it derives from hatred of another group, as we find with the Nation of Islam toward whites or the Hutus toward the Tutsis in Rwanda. And of course, these causes can intersect with each other. The power relation can go either way. Groups like the KKK in the United States had far more power than the blacks they victimized. The Nation of Islam responded to the mistreatment of blacks with their own hatred and racism, declaring white people to be essentially and irredeemably corrupted human beings. Both groups are racist. The Jews in Nazi Germany were not a poor group, but had disproportionate wealth and influence. The Jews in Poland at the same time were poor and had little political strength. Both were targeted and killed. Anti-Semitism did not spring from one particular power differential. If you study the history of any part of the world, you will find nasty and violent tribalism, sometimes expressing itself as racism. There have been Japanese who were racist toward the Chinese, Chinese toward the Manchurians, Persian Aryans toward the Dravidians, Jews toward Gentiles, Gentiles towards Jews. And according to a 2013 study conducted by Scandinavian academics, the the people of Jordan are the most racist nationality in the world, with India in second place. They claimed that the most racially intolerant countries were in Africa and Asia. Now, I don't know about that, but it certainly supports the observation that racism is not limited to one race or part of the world. So the idea that racism is some white or Western European phenomenon of the past few centuries is wrong. Ironically, the claim that it is kind of close to racist itself. Racism is, unfortunately, found throughout our world. It is one expression of the ubiquitous tribalism that we always struggle with. Okay, so now we have a better idea of what racism is and how it arises. Why is that important? Well, wrong views lead to wrong solutions. The right view can lead to helpful solutions. If a physician diagnoses the cause of your problem incorrectly, the prescribed medication probably isn't going to help. The proper diagnosis of the nature of the problem is necessary for an effective treatment or cure. When you think that racism is purely a social phenomenon coming out of one particular culture, you're going to try and fix it by identifying its cultural cause and eradicating it. And this very easily leads to othering the cause. The cause of racism is found in that other group, that other ideology, that other time period. But the potential for racism and racial hatred lies in all of us. Whether you're white, black, Korean, Jewish, Buddhist, conservative, or liberal, it's a tendency that you have to look out for, not just something the other person has to watch out for. And once we understand that racism is one expression of a larger phenomenon, we recognize that it's not enough to simply look around in ourselves and in others for racism alone. We all need to be on guard against all kinds of tribalism, not just racism. Failure to do so leads to our obsession with molehills while mountains loom around us. On college campuses, a slight perceived racial microaggression can attract a lot of attention, while overt nastiness toward the political other is business as usual. We carefully count ethnic diversity in every group, but ideological, national, or religious diversity count for almost nothing. Understanding where racism comes from and the fact that it is part of a larger destructive tendency should make us more attentive to halting all kinds of tribalism. What's the correct prescription then for what ails us? We begin to overcome our tribalist instinct when we increase our appreciation for the humanity of the other. But this can't simply be intellectual. It must be through experience. We need to spend more time with each other. We all understand intellectually that people with other politics, cultures, religions, and favorite football teams are human like us. But our genetic hardwiring makes us fearful and distrustful of people in other tribes. And we all know that fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. We need to minimize tribal isolation, not increase it. It's not about eliminating tribes. There will always be different groups, which is fine and unavoidable anyway. It's about helping us all appreciate the humanity in other groups. The football coach who intentionally mixes the races of roommates during preseason is doing this. The Asian Student Association that invites the whole campus to a celebration of Diwali is doing this. The college Democrats who get together each year for an event with the college Republicans are doing this. The cure to racism is getting us all to spend more time together, not less, not isolate us from each other, not treat groups differently. That only drives a wedge between them. And no one's saying it's going to be easy. It can be a bumpy road when you bring different people along on the same journey. People can get offended, insulted, annoyed, but it's essential to making progress. I'll leave you with this thought. Looking at the history of interplay between tribes of humans, the question that occurs to me is not why racism developed, but why we started fighting against it. What was it in human beings that made us say, we're treating that other group poorly and we need to stop? How do we tap into that? Where do we go for the inspiration to overcome our nastiness toward each other and appreciate our common humanity? That's what I want to find. Thank you.